Let me see this. Oh, I've seen this video before. Well, no, I haven't seen this video. I've seen snippets of this video. Oh my God, I'm looking at it. He just has the, you know, I don't want to say what I'm looking at right now. And, you know, every time Gonzalo Lira comes up, I see new content from Gonzalo Lira because he's been doing online media creation for, I don't know, maybe like almost as long as I've been alive, right? And for the entirety of it, he's been a schizophrenic freak from start to finish, right? And I'm not trying to poison the water here. I'm being sent clips of Gonzalo Lira that I can't show on stream because it's like, oh, in this video, apparently he says something really offensive. I click it, and the first thing I see is just a laptop right next to him with the N-word emblazoned. Just make sure it's in frame. Make sure you can't crop it out. Make sure it's impossible. It's like, might as well just have like a bouncing watermark with a swastika just bouncing around the screen. Make sure that I can't use it on Twitch no matter what. Anyway, let's get straight into Gonzalo Lira. Actually, I want to get straight into Gonzalo Lira now that Kraut sent me that and he's got me in the mood. So our old friend Gonzalo Lira is back in the news again. Now, he's in the news for a few reasons. The main reason he is in the news is because Tucker Carlson has dropped episode 47 of Tucker on X, formerly known as Twitter. See, Tucker Carlson had a bit of an oopsie over at Fox. They were charged $850 million in legal fees, and then he was booted. And that's a story for another day. But point is, Tucker Carlson is no longer on Fox News. So now he has basically complete control of content creation, media creation, whatever he wants to do. I imagine he had a lot of control over at Fox as well, because from the type of coverage he was engaging in over there, for example, saying that for every, and I bring this up every time, but I will always bring it up, for every one Russian soldier that dies, 7 Ukrainian soldiers, like crazy stuff that I would imagine could only come out of his mouth if he placed that in the room saying, I'm going to say this today, or went out there and said it on his own. There's no way Fox brought him to him because it's complete nonsense. But now we can see him completely untethered with no Fox regulations. And so he's been going particularly off the rails recently. And now on episode 47 of his Twitter talk show, he didn't bring on Gonzalo Lira, who is the person in question. He brought on Gonzalo Lira's father. Let me read you the tweet, the title of the tweet that he posted about this. Gonzalo Lira is an American citizen who's been tortured in a Ukrainian prison since July for the crime of criticizing Zelensky. Biden officials approve of this because they'd like to apply the same standard here. The media agree. Wow. I'm happy he called John Media and asked, do you agree? And they said, yes, we agree. Thank you. Here's a statement from Gonzalo Lira's father, and then he has all the timestamps. So this is a 19-minute video, and we have so much stuff to cover. We're not going to watch it right now. I do want to watch it on stream, but we're not going to watch it right now for brevity's sake. Point is, though, he says everything that he wants to say in this tweet that he ends up pushing in the video, which is A, Gonzalo Lira is an American citizen who's been tortured in Ukrainian prison since July, and he was put in that prison because he criticized Zelensky. Biden's okay with this torture and horrible detainment for just criticizing Zelensky. And they want to do the same thing in the United States, detain American journalists and torture them. And the media agrees with this for some reason. The media wants to be detained and tortured. So that's the idea. That's the main points that Tucker Carlson's bringing forward. Now, if you're not familiar with who Gonzalo Lira is, this might feel like it's coming straight out of left field. And I know a lot of my fans are familiar because we've mocked him quite a lot on the show before as a pretty silly Russian propagandist. And there's already a community note down here, so I'm not the only one bringing this up. But let me tell you guys a little bit about Gonzalo Lira's background and who Tucker Carlson is sticking his neck out for before we talk about the veracity of these claims. So Gonzalo Lira has been making content on the internet for quite a while now, but he wasn't always making content about the war in Ukraine. In fact, him living in Ukraine is a more recent development that came from him marrying somebody in Ukraine and moving there. Gonzalo Lira is actually a Chilean American, and he usually before this hard drive into foreign policy was known for his other online pseudonym, which was Coach Red Pill, which he would get advice about women and how to date them and how all women are whores. And I mean, not well, yeah, you get the idea. I'll just play some of his old content so you would get the idea of the type of stuff he would make before.
I'm lucky enough to get fan letters, and one fan letter in particular really struck me. So let me read you a little excerpt. But just from the message, you can tell that he's salt of the earth, hardworking fella, just decent as the day is long, you know what I mean? And of course he's gonna get fucked over by whores and damaged women. Of course. Whores and damaged women are gonna light on a nice guy like flies on shit. Yeah, of course, of course. Women, especially damaged women, especially women who are narcissists, i.e. attention whores, yeah, they're gonna go.
He would know a lot about that.
For a guy who is going to give in to their demands, who's going to give them all of his attention. He's going to, who is going to be there for her all the time. Yeah, because that's what these women want. They want a guy who's their slave. And of course,
anyway, you get the idea. Grievance. Coach Red Pill. He was a dating coach, and he gave red-pilled takes on women and dating. I think we have another video. Here's another one.
Women are like dogs. They are exactly like dogs. And never forget that. You have to treat them like you would treat a dog. Firmly. Every woman I've ever been with responds extraordinarily well to a almost violent physical encounter. I am not saying rape. I am not saying violence that leaves any kind of permanent injury or
okay, look, I'm not gonna go. I feel like this one might be slightly trim clip. I don't really know. It's crazy even think he would say that. But Gonzalo Lira said some pretty crazy stuff over the years on how to get women. I'm sure he was an expert and he helped many people. He seems like the type of guy who probably had women clamoring over each other, climbing over each other to get to him. Point is, though, eventually he made a transition. And the transition he made came after he came over here to Ukraine. I said here because I've been in Ukraine for so long. He went over to Ukraine and he started talking about Ukrainian politics. And in the lead up to the invasion, we started to see more and more concentration specifically on Russo-Ukrainian relations. And then once the invasion happened, he was covering the war 24/7 from his apartment in Kharkiv. And a lot of people have used the word journalist, like Tucker Carlson here. He has used the word journalist to describe him. I know that others have used the word journalist to describe him. Here's some other people using the word journalist. Was it yeah, here's one. Ian Miles Chong and others have used the word journalist to describe him. I know Elon Musk has used the word journalist to describe him. I just want to quickly say that at no point during the entirety of Gonzalo Lira's time in Ukraine did he ever engage in something that could be even misconstrued as journalism. I want to repeat that. At no point during the entirety of his time in Ukraine did he use a single moment of his time huddling in his apartment in Kharkiv, which is what he did. He didn't go out and do field reporting. Did he do anything that would be considered journalism? MG referenced the musical. Thank you so much for the tier 1. Appreciate it. What he would usually do is he'd be in his apartment and he'd go on panels and talk about the war and repost Russian propaganda, say Russian propaganda slogans, and just repost Russian propaganda and Russian propaganda talking points completely uncritically. Saying that, you know, if Russia invades, Ukraine's going to get crushed, and that the Russian invasion is the most brilliant invasion ever, and that Bucha was fake and it wasn't done by the Russians, and he would, anytime there's a big strike on any civilian center, he'll be one of the first to come out and say, no, it wasn't the Russians, maybe it was actually the Ukrainians, it could have been the Ukrainians. And he's generally spent his time hyping up the idea that Ukraine is a neo-Nazi thug state that needs to be conquered by the Russians. In this brilliant move, Putin's brilliant. He's showing great brilliance in invading Ukraine. Ukraine's collapse is inevitable, and generally rah-rahing and cheering on the Russians and the Russian invasion, which he has which he has actively endorsed on multiple occasions. That is his content. And I have videos of it. Here's a video, for example, from the Ukrainian government where they, funnily enough, blur out his face like none of us know this guys. Who is this guy? Like none of us know who this guy is. Here is him just saying different talking points. It's not well edited together, but you can see him running through the basics.
Vladimir Putin, he is, for all intents and purposes, what you would call an ethnic nationalist. But he's not an imperialist, the Kiev regime. I'm telling you right now. These people are neo-fascist, neo-Nazis. The West is the one puppeteering Zelensky, right? The Kiev regime also constantly shelling the regions of the Donbass. 16,000 people died after 2015 up until the start of this conflict. 1,000 children or 800 children were killed.
So this is just like 30 seconds. There's other things I could point to. I know that every single time that the Russians say they blew up a HIMARS, he believes it. Again, he reposts Russian propaganda uncritically, cheers on the Russian invasion. Anytime that there's some atrocity, he'll either doubt it or deny it or beat it away. And he's always inevitably predicting the collapse of the Ukrainian government. And due to this type of commentary he has given from within Ukraine, he gets brought on a lot of shows like George Galloway and other alt media commentators who want to give you the fun, quirky, alternative perspective because they go against the grain. They're alternative media. They don't want to accept the establishment's position. So they just run over and take the establishment position of the Russian government because they're so quirky and original. He is often one of the tools that people use in order to do that. I know George Galloway has used them in that way. But also, the Russians themselves have used them in the way. Here's him being featured in Russian media, being talked about his statements early on in the war. This is in 2022. And in this, it's titled like American Journalist says that Ukrainians are going to hunt down the civilians. They're passing out guns to hunt down the civilians. And his words would often be featured on Russian state propaganda. He has been on Russian state TV before. He has been on Russian state TV programs with, I think, like Solonyov. I know he's been on RT America. Point is, he produces Russian propaganda, spreads it in the West, spreads it in Russia, denies atrocities against Ukraine while it's at war, and the narratives he's promoting is the narratives of the invading state. So that is what he is doing in Ukraine. So I wouldn't call that journalism because he's not going out and doing journalism. He's just staying in his apartment and doing fuck all. The closest thing he does to journalism is interview other YouTubers about their opinions, not as experts, but as YouTubers, like history YouTubers. And again, I'm not saying that online panels is evil or anything like that. I'm just saying that an online panel between content creators isn't really journalism. And so calling him a journalist when all he does is shoot the shit, say the Russians are going to win, and regurgitate not only Russian government numbers, Russian government information, but just Russian propaganda, that isn't journalism. I mean, like at best, I mean, he's doing the equivalent for the Russians of what Mark Felton does. He's just reading article after article after article, repeating it, and then saying the end is near the end of the year. Mark Felton doesn't do the last part, but you get the point.
Tier 1 subscription.
It's not original content.
Collapsed with no vote of confidence. Opposition voted in. Border blockade gone. We did it, Reddit.
Hey, thank you so much for the tier 1. Point is, he's not a journalist. He's a propagandist. So that's what he was doing. And eventually he was warned, like, hey, dude, if you keep engaging in this type of behavior, if you keep spreading Russian propaganda,
has donated $5. Spies for Russia. Denies Russian war crimes. Gets arrested. Violates bail. Gets arrested again.
True.
Blue, I'm the victim.
That's the thing. Eventually they came to him and they warned him and they were like, look, if you keep doing this type of stuff, if you keep saying Bucha wasn't done by the Russians, it was all fake, and you keep engaging in the way that you've been engaging, making propaganda for the invading country, which is against the law in Ukraine, it is against the law to produce propaganda for the invading country while at war, then you will get arrested. They warned him about that. And then he continued to do it. Then he got arrested. And then he was put out on bail after he was facing, I think he's facing about 5 years potentially 5 years. I think that's like the highest it could go. It was like 5 years or 5 to 15. I think it was around 5 years. And then once they put him out on bail, the first thing he did, which he wasn't allowed to do, was then try to flee the country on his motorcycle and cross the border, which, of course, they looked at his documents at the border and said, no, you're out on bail, you can't leave, and then they put him back in jail. And so the only reason he's currently detained is because he tried to flee the country after being put out on bail. So that's the first thing. It was the producing of Russian propaganda. But that's not the only thing he's being accused of. And he's also been accused of taking pictures of Ukrainian soldiers. I got to know exactly the conditions of like how that went and what he used it for. We're going to be having the trial and the actual court dates tomorrow. I think the court dates are, we're going to have the first court dates on the 12th and on the 17th. I think it's the 12th and the 17th of the first court dates. So hopefully we'll be getting more information. But there's also conversations about him possibly leaking the, I know that Anna Cirillo, I believe it was, is going to be giving testimony about him possibly leaking the, or attempting to leak the addresses of journalists. But I also know that this right here, he's engaged in that type of behavior before. He's engaged in behavior where he's showing where journalists are, endangering their life, in my opinion, while going about in Ukraine. So if this is the type of behavior he engages in, it really makes me think, what are we going to see in this trial? What exactly is he doing if he's as reckless to do this while in a war zone?
All the System Pig journalists are here. See? All these people, they're all System Pig journalists. They're all like, here to report on how they led Ukraine up the garden path, and now Ukraine is fucked. Yeah. The people pushing the narrative. These are the people pushing the narrative. So you can see them. See them real good. Yeah. And the best part is that they're all staying at a 5-star hotel, a comfy 5-star hotel, while they led Ukraine up the garden path.
So, for those of you who might not know why this would be particularly enraging to me, it's because Ukraine's at war, and locations where journalists hang out are regularly targeted and attacked. And there was one instance where a cafe that was frequented by journalists in Kramatorsk was bombed, killing journalists. There have been dozens upon dozens of journalists that have died during this war. French journalists, American journalists, Ukrainian journalists, even Russian journalists. Journalists are killed not only when they're on the front reporting on the action, but also in the buildings where they eat, in their apartments, giving out the location of where journalists are hanging out and posting it publicly online, even if the intent was just to mock them, is dangerous, considering, again, they're in a war zone. Don't give their location to anybody. It can be used to target them. UN data was used in order to target hospitals in Syria. Do we really believe that information like this couldn't be used to target the media? This is the type of behavior that has gotten Gonzalo Lira particularly hated by journalists in Ukraine, and particularly hated by just about everybody that knows about him in Ukraine. And that's on top of the Bucha denial, the Russian propaganda production for both in Russia and in the West. That's on top of just his generally snobby and kind of snide and snub behavior. That's on top of his disgusting views about women and his, quite honestly, piss poor dating advice. Now the dude has made his own bed. He went to a country and lived in the country, and then once that country was invaded, against the law, he started to produce propaganda for the invading country. That's besides all the other things that I think we're going to learn, or we might learn over the next few days as the court case continues to go on and evidence is presented before the public and before the court. He produced that propaganda, was told to stop, did not stop, was then arrested, was then let out on bail, and then tried to flee the country on a motorcycle. And the way it's presented by Tucker here is an American citizen who's been tortured in Ukrainian prison since July. Where did the torture claim come from? I mean, that's pretty interesting. Well, it comes from Gonzalo Lira. When Gonzalo Lira was put out on bail and he was fleeing to the border, he's quite a bright guy. He's very smart. He recorded himself as he was going to the border, posting the videos on Twitter, describing like why he was leaving and he was going to flee to get asylum in Hungary, and how he was tortured in Ukrainian prisons, even though there was he didn't have any evidence of it. He didn't have any like physical bodily evidence or anything like that. He said that they specifically heard him in areas where he knew that nothing would be shown. Like, so they heard him and tortured him in a way that was undetectable, and that they scratched the eyeballs, scratched the whites of his eyeballs with a toothpick, which we also had no evidence of. Now look, considering his record of telling lies, whether it be about Bucha, whether it be about, oh look, the Ukrainians have lost all these HIMARS, even though to this day I don't think we still have a single confirmed case of HIMARS being lost. Considering his long history of lying, I don't think we should take him at his word when he claims he went through toothpick eyeball torture without evidence. But Tucker Carlson, being an astute journalist, put it down there with no asterisks and with no information of, hey, this information about him being tortured comes from one of the parties involved in the case. Maybe that could have some bias. Maybe that could come with some Nope. He's an astute journalist. He doesn't need to mention such things. And for the crime of criticizing Zelensky, if you saw Gonzalo Lira's content and you saw why he was arrested and the examples that were shown, none of them were, hey, Zelensky's corrupt. Hey, Zelensky did cocaine. Hey, Zelensky's, too libertarian for my life, whatever it might be. The reason he was arrested was for promoting the invasion, for being in favor of the invasion and producing propaganda of the invading country that is going to villages and creating death pits where people uncover hundreds of bodies afterwards once the Russians are removed. Like in Izium, over 440 bodies there. Or in Bucha, the thing he denies, where there was a death pit. I visited that death pit. I don't call it a mass grave. I think Timothy Snyder was right to call it a death pit, because a grave has some dignity. It has a tombstone. It has, a patch. It isn't just bodies with their hands tied behind their back, quickly put on top of each other with some soft dirt put over them. He didn't get arrested for criticizing Zelensky. He got arrested for producing propaganda for the invading force, and possibly more, as we'll wait for the case to go on, and if rumors are to be believed. But I don't want to entertain rumors until we have something in writing in the court case and we can see the evidence before us. He then goes forward to say, Biden officials approve of this. How would we even begin to know if Biden officials approved of A, the torture that did not happen, or B, him being arrested for criticizing Zelensky, which did not happen, or C, what happened in general, which they probably don't even have much knowledge of to begin with? Because they'd like to apply the same standard here. So if we were to apply the same standard at home, first, America would need to be invaded. And then somebody in the United States who didn't grow up here, who moved here from overseas, was then producing propaganda for the invading force, saying, oh, that massacre in LA, that didn't really happen. Or actually, that was the American rebels that did that. Or, oh, that thing there, that, no. The government in DC is actually led by neo-Confederates. And we need to get rid of the neo-Confederate menace. And at a certain point, I think it'd be very easy for me to believe that the American government would arrest him in similar circumstances, even if our free speech laws are more expansive than basically any country in Europe. I mean, during the Civil War, Abraham Lincoln shut down the pro-Confederate press. During World War II, we didn't arrest people just for being fascists. or ban their parties just for being fascist parties, which the UK did as well for the British Union of Fascists. We also just arrested people for being Japanese and put them all in big camps. I mean, I got, like, obviously that was 80 years ago. Standards have changed. I don't think we would do that again. But we have violated sometimes constitutional rights in the modern age as well. For example, the monitoring of mosques after 9/11, particularly in New York. Which, I mean, 9/11, New York, you can kind of see the connected line there. Where again, this is, you cannot produce propaganda for the invading army. That's the law that's being talked about. Very different than the picture that Tucker Carlson is painting here. Because the picture that's being painted here is very different than, hey, we arrested the guy who didn't even live here until a few years ago, who is making propaganda for the invading army in the cities that the invading army is bombing, while he's denying that they're doing the bombing that he's present for. But despite all of this, that doesn't mean that there isn't still other interpretations of what happened. Ian Miles Chong put out a message responding to this interview, Tucker Carlson's. Why isn't the Biden admin doing anything to free Gonzalo Lira? He is an American citizen and an independent journalist, very independent, who was detained and tortured by Ukrainian intelligence services. You know what? I watched it myself. It was horrific. It was terrible. You know what they did? They made him put on deodorant, and it was hard to watch. Tortured by Ukrainian intelligence services and remains locked up in a prison, stripped of his rights, all for criticizing Zelensky. Again, this isn't true. This isn't true. He could just listen to the government's, he could look at the government's report. He could read the Daily Beast article that was put out about it. That was put out in May of this year, like 6 months old. You can do any Googling, all for criticizing Zelensky. You know, it's crazy because I'm seeing many of the same people who reported on, and I reported on it too, who reported on the mayor of Kiev, Klitschko, criticizing Zelensky, saying that he has autocratic tendencies because they're part of two separate parties. They're political rivals. They're jostling. Klitschko is worried about certain war powers possibly maybe going too far, but also still saying he should be president until the war is over. And I saw people bringing up these critiques and be like, oh, look at that. Look at that. Oh, people don't like Zelensky anymore. People don't like Zelensky. Haha, look, he's critiquing. But then a week later, it's like, oh, you'll get arrested for critiquing Zelensky. Well, which one is it? Is the mayor of Kiev criticizing Zelensky, or do you get arrested for criticizing Zelensky? I've criticized Zelensky on the channel before. I've criticized the government in Ukraine, whether it be for the improper handling, and this is actually a Klitschko problem as well, something he was criticized for, whether it was the improper handling of bunkers, with bunker doors being locked and civilians not being able to access them, whether it was the stealing of humanitarian aid and people would resell it. So it would still find its way into the country, but people would be a middleman, find a way to skim off some of the top, which is a real issue when it comes to humanitarian aid. It hasn't been proven when it comes to weapons, but it has been an issue when it comes to humanitarian aid. I could talk about government contracts being given out to friends, and specifically friends who make shell companies who are going to do a shoddy work of rebuilding the country, which is something that happened in Bucha. There are real critiques to bring up Zelensky. I've brought them up on the channel before. It's just those critiques to me, and I talk about them less than, you know, the atrocities that are being committed in Ukraine, because at the end of the day, I do think a corruption scandal, a multi-million-dollar corruption scandal is awful. I think 447 dead bodies and a death pit is even more awful. But there are real critiques to make of Zelensky. The Kiev Independent and other outlets that have covered these problems with his administration, other outlets that have covered critiques of Zelensky, other politicians that have critiqued Zelensky, they're not all just like going into prison for critiquing Zelensky. The reason this guy went into prison is because he produced propaganda for the invading army. Again, it was not for criticizing Zelensky. Now here comes the big kicker. The richest man on the planet. And if you notice this, you saw he had a community note there. Oh, is it disappearing? It keeps disappearing, reappearing. I don't know what's going on with this community note. All of these posts are getting community noted. It's beautiful, the community note system, I gotta say. I've said before, community notes is not a solution to disinformation on the platform. It isn't. if you post, and this is the one that I see the most with the war in Gaza, if you post footage from Syria pretending it's from Gaza, and it gets millions upon millions of views in 3 days and then get community noted on the 4th, that's about how long it takes a lot of times, is days upon days upon days. I'll get notified way after when I try to make a community report on something, finally being community noted. And those posts will be noted 3 days in, and then 90% of the people who are going to end up seeing that post already saw the post before the note. And so those people are just walking around the world not knowing that what they saw was misinformation. So community notes is not an end-all be-all solution. It's not fast enough, and Twitter does not have enough staff to make it go faster. Twitter does not have enough staff to fight for free speech of people in India, for them to be able to make the posts that they want to on social media without government crackdowns, and then being able to freely access content on the platform from, for example, Canadian Sikhs that are against the Indian government. But that's all a separate issue. Point is, though, Elon Musk responded to this with the message, an American YouTuber has been imprisoned for 5 years in Ukraine and allegedly tortured for making videos. This is not okay. I got at a certain point, look, I ain't no commie. I am not a communist. I am not. I don't believe capitalism is the end-all be-all of human development, but I am not sold on communism, particularly after traveling to Ukraine and learning a lot more history. But what I will say is this is the wealthiest man on the planet. And I want to believe somewhere deep in my soul in some version of meritocracy affecting the world around us. And I do believe that is true. I believe that if you're smarter, you're more likely to succeed in school. And if you're better with science and tech, you're more likely to do well in those fields. I believe in it to some degree. But this is such a bad read, such a terrible read of the situation, such a misinformed read of the situation from Elon, that I have to start questioning meritocracy altogether, with this man being the wealthiest man in America. An American YouTuber has been imprisoned for 5 years in Ukraine. Number one, no, he hasn't. The first court date is tomorrow. Then the second, I think, is on the 17th of December. The evidence has yet to even be provided out in a court setting and for the legal process to play itself out. There has been no sentencing. He has not been sentenced to 5 years. He is facing 5 years. So no, he has not been in prison for 5 years. He hasn't. Okay. Moving on. And allegedly tortured. Again, the source for this torture claim, which Tucker just says he was tortured, Elon Musk says allegedly tortured. So it makes me think that he thought a little bit about what he was saying. But then why, again, did he get this wrong, if that was whatever, and allegedly tortured for making videos? Again, the torture claim comes from Gonzalo himself, which he's presented no evidence for, and he's a pathological liar. So I don't know why you wouldn't mention that when you say allegedly tortured, because nobody knows where the allegedly comes from. I mean, if this is what we're saying, allegedly tortured, if we're using allegedly this loosely, then we could say that allegedly there are bioweapons in Ukraine, because the Russians said that there could be. Allegedly, there's been a lot of allegations in the world. You got to say where the allegation came from, or you're not providing a lot of vital context. Just like Tucker didn't provide the context, Elon didn't provide the context. Then he says, this is not okay. Now, this is the interesting part. As you can see here, Tucker got community noted. Gonzalo Lira was arrested in May for justification denial of Russian invasion of Ukraine, a crime under article blah, 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 blah. You get the idea. Elon also got one. Gonzalo Lira was arrested on May 1st and is currently being held in the Kharkiv pretrial detention center. His court hearing is scheduled for December 12th and December 21st. Okay, it's the 12th and the 21st, not the 17th. He has not been imprisoned for 5 years in Ukraine, nor is there any evidence of him being tortured. Sources, the Yahoo News, Open Data Bot, Yahoo News again, and the Daily Beast. Damn. That's getting railed pretty hard by the community note system. But it didn't stop there, because community note system was dragging Elon all week. He had a community note here. It's no longer there. Somebody must have removed it, but there was a community note on this as well, talking about the tour, like a bunch of different stuff. And now it's no longer there. And the response responding to this is complaining about the community note. So I don't know if I have the original, but you get the idea. What is the status of this American journalist? He was community noted. Maybe he removes the community note. Maybe somebody else did. I don't know. Community note isn't there anymore. The response, though, he still has a community. Oh, now the community note's back. I don't know what's up with Twitter. Gonzalo Lira is not a journalist, but a video blogger who pivoted from pickup artist advice to pro-Russian political commentary. That is true. He was arrested in Ukraine for wartime propaganda, including massacre denial, and provided info on Ukrainian troops and journalists to the Russians. Interesting. The note is being gamed by state actors. Will be helpful in figuring who they are. Thanks for jumping into the honeypot, guys. Lamau. Dude. I can feel the force that he used to press down on each letter on his phone with his thumbs, nearly cracking the screen, and every single syllable typed here. I can feel it. Thanks for jumping in the honeypot, guys. Lamau. I can feel it. Oh, this was all this was a ploy. This was a ploy. I know I look stupid here, and like my own platform is telling me I'm wrong, but actually I just look stupid on purpose to catch you calling me out for being stupid. Elon's always one step ahead of the rest of us. He's ahead of the curve. He's ahead of the curve. The response from community notes, though, was beautiful. And when this happened, it was a glorious day. It was a glorious day. Put a smile on my face. Interesting to notice being gamed by state actors will be helpful in figuring out who they are. Thanks for jumping in the honeypot, guys. Lamau. For a community note to be shown on a post, it needs to be found helpful by people of multiple points of view, not just people from one group. If enough contributors from different points of view rate a note as helpful, it earns a status of helpful and starts showing on X. Wow. That was helpful. Thank you. That was very helpful. Man, he's getting dragged by his own website. Very sad, very sad. But despite all this, despite how silly it looked, despite how silly him fighting against the one good thing he's added to the platform, he didn't even add it to the platform. He just kept somebody else's development on the platform. There were still others who got in the trenches to defend him, like his brave white knight, David Sachs. Community Notes is generally an excellent system, but the Ukrainian InfoWar op figured out how to game it a while ago. Gonzalo Lira published YouTube videos critical of the Ukrainian government. He did, but his arrest didn't have to do with him just being critical of the Ukrainian government. It was the cheering on of the invading government. He did not give away positions. This is a silly claim since there are many channels showing exactly where the battlefronts are. See, this is stupid on multiple levels, because if he was to just wait and we were to find out the exact details of exactly what he filmed, then we could figure out if it had anything to do with frontline positions. I don't think it has anything to do with frontline positions. Like positions on the front line, as he's talking about the OSCENT kind of frontline maps we see from Institute of Study of War and all these other people. I don't believe it, because I don't believe that Gonzalo Lira would ever step a million miles within an actual front line of a war zone, as in he would not get within artillery range willingly unless it came to him. So I don't think he actually went to any front line. So I doubt that. But I could imagine it could be like some filming of air defense, something like that. We don't know. But the point is here, he did not give away positions. This is a silly claim since there are many channels showing exactly where the battlefronts are. Does he not know that if you show the location of soldiers, that's still a security risk? Does he think because there are publicly available OSCENT open source intelligence maps that roughly tells you the position of where Ukrainian and Russian front lines are, that means that geolocatable data on Ukrainian soldiers could still not be used to kill them? Like what happened with that Reddit post on that school where all those foreigners were training at the start of the war that got a bunch of foreign volunteers, International Legion fighters, killed? What about the different posts? I remember when I think it was Gray Zone ended up posting a picture of a Russian of a Russian base with an address on it that ended up getting a bunch of soldiers and commanders killed. Man, I really hope David Sachs never does any war reporting. I hope he doesn't come anywhere close within a war zone for everyone's safety. Anyway, the Ukrainian government responded because, I mean, the richest man on the planet came out and was calling for the release of this very obscure blogger because of Tucker Carlson's coverage. So they came out and responded saying, let's just read the article here. Ukrainian law enforcement actions were carried out in accordance with the law, the security service SBU said in a comment to NV, I believe that stands for New Voice of Ukraine, regarding Elon Musk's Twitter comments on the arrest of pro-Russian blogger Gonzalo Lira. Thank you, Yahoo Finance. Oh God, that notorious Russian propagandist Gonzalo. Is there like an alternative way of spelling this, or did they just get it wrong? Maybe I'm just horribly uncultured and I'm being actually extremely offensive right now. I think they just misspelled it. Lira, who holds dual citizenship of Chile and the United States, was arrested in Kharkiv for promoting Russian aggression in Ukraine and spreading pro-Kremlin ideas on social media. An investigation found that Lira's videos denied Russian war crimes and justified Russian aggression. Lira claimed that Ukraine was shelling his own territory and that a neo-Nazi regime ruled the country. And so Rusich and other Russian neo-Nazi militias had to come and save the country. I don't know if you saw like exactly how crazy his post about the war can get, but I remember looking at this map he posted. Oh God. I wonder if I can find it. There's no way I can find it on such short notice. Gonzalo Lira map Ukraine. He had this map which was Ukraine like split up with, yes, I can't believe I found it. Oh, it's beautiful. Here it is. Here's the map he posted for the future of Ukraine. This is what he said the future of Ukraine is going to be. So the future of Ukraine, according to Gonzalo Lira, this is what he posted on social media, is going to be first, of course, Donetsk, Luhansk, and Crimea are going to be annexed. So is Kherson, and so is Zaporozhye. So that means they're going to also take the city of Kherson back and take the city of Zaporozhye. They're also going to take Kharkiv. They're also going to take Mykolaiv as well. I think they also took Odessa there, and they took a little bit of Moldova and built into Transnistria there. They took a little bit more of Ukraine there, but but instead of looking at all the Russian conquests, let's look at some other areas here. Looks like Poland is getting some land as well. Slovakia is going to get some land. Hungary gets a tiny strip of land right next to Slovakia. Romania gets some land. Isn't that interesting? Romania gets some land, and it looks like Chernobyl is just marked as radiation for whatever reason. Well, look at that. This is what he posted on social media to say this is the future of the country. Does he also have Dnipro as part of Russia? Really? Man, he believes that anything that even vaguely sounds like they even know a single Russian word, it just goes to Russia, huh? My God, conquest of language much. My goodness. Anyway, I hope Elon's doing okay, because I think he's kind of going off the rails here when you look at the type of stuff he's promoting now. He's calling Russian propagandists journalists and saying that if he gets corrected for just blatantly lying about a story, that it's the Ukrainian PSYOP information space, just Ukrainian government sabotaging Elon's posts. He's gone a long way from the early days of the war, where he was trying to offer his support, offer Starlink, do everything he can to help Ukraine. He's gone a long way from that to where he is today. Somebody should check up on him.